I want to support everything that my colleague, the ranking member of the Finance Committee, just said about these tariffs. I want to make 2 points about the tariffs. One, the tariffs themselves, and then second, the congressional failure to assert its own authority on policies that it has the constitutional responsibility for when our failure results in pain, economic pain and insecurity for the American people. First of all, the tariffs. Mr. President, when the history of this decision is written, President Trump's imposition of these wild and reckless tariffs is going to be seen as one of the greatest economic blunders in a century. It's that bad. What's happening in Vermont is happening in every state across this country. First of all, these tariffs are a tax. Second, they are paid for by consumers, by manufacturers, by producers. Third, it's having a negative impact on trade and on our economy already. Today's information about the gross domestic product shrinkage is evidence in of itself. In Vermont, Trump's tariffs are estimated to cost Vermont households more than $1 billion. More than 18,000 Vermonters work in industries that are targeted by retaliatory tariffs, but virtually every Vermonter is going to be impacted by increased cost, inflation, as a result of the tariffs. An example, food, fuel, energy, all of these things are going to be impacted and really affect people in their day-to-day, month-to-month budgets. We get a lot of our electricity, a lot of our home heating fuel, and a lot of our petroleum from Canada, especially in the northern part of our state. Those costs are going to be increased, especially with the expected retaliatory tariffs that are imposed on us by countries subject to the arbitrary action of President Trump. Farmers are really hit hard. Most of our farmers in Vermont, they import their fertilizer from Canada. That's about a 25% increase that they're going to be paying. And these are farmers, as the President knows, that operate on the thinnest of margins in the most uncertain of activities, subject to weather and price fluctuations and so many other things that make our farmers courageous entrepreneurs. But why add 25% to the cost of fertilizer when that input cost is already so high? It is mind-boggling to think that this is a voluntary action by the President. Canada, by the way, happens to be our biggest trading partner. We're not unique in that. 34 countries, or pardon me, 34 states have Canada as its major trading partner. In these tariffs, in Canada, we have $2.1 billion. Import partner with Canada, 20% tariff. China, a lot of input from China that our manufacturers use, 54% tariff, plus who knows how many more tariffs, depending on the day and how President Trump feels when he wakes up. Trinidad and Tobago, 81 million, 10% tariff. Germany, 75 million. Mexico, 77 million. You know, very frustratingly for all of us, the sweeping global tariff order unnecessarily increases prices and taxes on countries that have trade surpluses with America. You know, and I recently heard from a Vermonter who imports coffee, has a niche business that has become extremely successful. The tariffs on Colombia have resulted in this, a container that cost $700 last month. That container now costs $13,000. How do you deal with that? A hit to the margin that's a bit, no business can absorb that. Vermont is also home to one of two businesses in the world that produces only these unique snow globes. And they've been in business for 25 years. It's a modest business, but it's one that was created by a Vermont entrepreneur, and it's been really successful. They're going to have to close their doors at the end of the summer with these increased tariffs basically on China. A second point that I think is relevant to these tariffs is the arbitrariness of their implementation and the arbitrariness of how and whom is affected. We've got a situation where we supposedly had these tariffs on China. Apple Computer, quite understandably, was upset. It was going to increase the cost of iPhones. Well, no problem. Tim Cook was at the inauguration, sitting on the throne of honor, and he had the telephone number, made the call, and the tariffs on iPhones vanished. Well, you know, that Snow Globe manufacturer that I mentioned from Vermont, she does not have Howard Lutnick's phone number. She does not have Scott Besson's phone number. She does not have President Trump's phone number. She's out of luck. So now, with these tariffs and the way they're being implemented without any congressional engagement whatsoever, we're turning our economy from one where it's based on a good product, really good service, where you compete in the marketplace, and if your product is better and your service is better, you succeed, to an economy that is more based on access. Do you know Lutnick? Do you know Besson? Do you know the president? Oh, and by the way, if you contributed a couple of $1 million to the inauguration, you probably do know them. And they give out the phone number. And that is absolutely outrageous. If people work hard, they produce a good product, they give good service, shouldn't they be entitled to the reward for the labor that they've done? Whereas what we're seeing now is that if you're connected, you can be rewarded regardless of how good your product is or how lousy your service is. And that is offensive and should be to every single one of us here. And that is absolutely what is happening in the White House. You know, another thing is there's a casual disregard to how hard it is for everyday families in your state and mine, in the ranking member state, to pay the bills. Because inflation has been here. And instead of arguing about who's at fault for that, let's solve the problem, not aggravate the problem. And these tariffs aggravate the problem. There's absolutely no denying that. This is just the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. You know, another element of this is, what is the purpose of these tariffs? You know, President Trump won't give a clear answer. It's to make us rich. They'll pay. We won't. It's to bring manufacturing back here. Or it's to punish folks that he deems unworthy. It depends on the day, and it depends on who's asking. So there is no coherent rationale connected to the imposition of this enormous economic pain and cost increase that's being imposed on American businesses and American consumers. You know, the other question here that's profoundly important for this institution, every single one of us is proud to be a member of the United States Senate. And I think our pride is about our pride in the Constitution as citizens, where under the Constitution, this Congress plays a role as a co-equal branch of government. And I think every single one of us here is wary of the accumulation of excessive power in any one person or in any one institution. Congress has steadily over the years been ceding much of its responsibility and authority to the executive branch. There's no authority greater than the power to tax. And that's why in the Constitution, the power to impose tariffs resides in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And shouldn't it be that way? Because in the imposition of a tax, there has to be a decision that asking our citizens who we represent to turn over hard-earned money to the government we have to be able to justify the purpose for which those funds are being expended. By allowing the president to take over, in effect, the taxing authority that occurs when a tariff is imposed, we've ceded that responsibility to him, or that authority to him, and we've abandoned our responsibility to look our constituents in the eye if and when we say a tax should be imposed. None of us like to do that, but a government has to collect revenues for the common good. And we have delegated that authority to the president, and it's wrong of us to do that. So we can have different views about whether there should be a tariff or what the rate should be. But we have a collective responsibility to do everything we can to maintain the constitutional structure of three independent branches of government, each a counterweight to the other. And that's not just an abstract concept. That's the wisdom that has served us well for well over 200 years, that those checks and balances give all our citizens an opportunity to have a seat at the table when major decisions about their lives and their futures are being made. So that is why this decision that we're about to make is not just about the tariffs. It's not just about, in my view, how recklessly they're being applied and imposed. It's not just how they infect our economy with corruption, where it's who you know rather than how hard you work that's going to get you ahead. It's about the basic structure of our constitutional order. And every single one of us has the responsibility to protect that, because that is not about us. It's not about who we represent. It's about how our country can operate with a democratic system where every single person, through their representatives, has a seat at the table. So, Mr. President, I urge all of us to take a look at what our constitutional responsibility is. And with whether we agree or not on so many different issues of vital concern to the future of this country, we each have a responsibility to act in a way that protects the constitutional system. And that means that we exercise authority over tariffs. We don't give that away to an executive branch decision. Mr. President, I yield the floor.